Hi, this is Karen Ramsey, and I am a raw fooder for 25 years and a vegan for 30 years, vegetarian for 48 years. And I run superhealthychildren.com and feelfabulouswithfood.com. I am here with my friend, longtime friend, over 2 decades. I've known Dr. Doug Graham. Actually met him in Florida many years ago when my children were young at his chiropractic office. And I've hosted him in New Jersey for my New Jersey Raw Food Support Network and spoken along with him at the Woodstock Fruit Festival. And I know that fruit festivals have spread worldwide because of Dr. Graham's work. So I want to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Graham. Dr. Douglas Graham, a lifetime athlete and raw fooder since 1978, is an advisor to world-class and motivated athletes and trainers from around the world. He has worked professionally with top performers from almost every sport and every field of entertainment. As owner of the fasting retreat in Costa Rica, Dr. Graham has personally supervised thousands of fasts. Dr. Graham is the author of numerous books on health and raw food, including the very famous book, The 80-10-10 Diet, which is published in, is it 14 languages?
We've lost track, but it's close to 24.
Okay, so people are reading this book worldwide. Dr. Graham speaks worldwide, and I believe it's because of his excellent role model that fruit festivals are spreading. I've known Dr. Graham for more than 2 decades and consider him a longtime mentor and friend. One reason I love his talks and his work is because he has remained consistent and true to his value and his word over the years. And so I am very excited to be speaking here and to feature Dr. Douglas Graham. Welcome, Dr. Graham.
Thanks, Karen. You said a lot right there. You put me on the spot. Now I got to come through. But I'm looking forward to doing that. And I know you want to ask, serious questions that will really help people. Hopefully the answers will really help people. And I'm going to do my best to give you everything I can.
Great. I have a variety of loaded questions here. And some of them I'm asking for my interest, and some I'm thinking of my audience. And so I'm going to start with the first one. I know that you are a triathlete, that you are so strong over age 60 years on an 80-10-10 low-fat raw food lifestyle. Can you tell others 4 or 5 tips on how to thrive on raw plant foods as we age?
Sure. I'd say the very first thing is to eat enough fruit. If you don't eat enough fruit, A, you're not going to stay raw. B, you're not going to have the energy that is required, the energy you want to have, because once you go back to eating starchy foods for your carbohydrate source, you're going to notice that it slows you down, that the vitality seems to go, an increased need for sleep. So number one is to make sure you eat enough fruit. And how much is enough? Enough fruit is enough so that you don't have cravings. You don't crave starchy foods. You don't crave heavy foods when the meal ends. You're not looking around for something to eat in between meals. If you eat enough fruit, you'll be satisfied from one meal right to the next, and that's the goal of eating anyway, right? Is to satisfy yourself. So fruit is the number one in that regard. Number two would be vegetables, and make sure you got to eat enough vegetables so that you're never looking for something salty or craving salty. Really, eating is a big deal, and you got to eat enough fruits and vegetables, just like we were told as children and as kids and as teenagers and as young adults. Eat your fruits and vegetables. This has never been more true than it is today. Today we have more health destroying influences as part of our natural environment, with 5G coming out and more radiation and RDF than ever before in history. And we have more drugs in the population, more drugs in the food supply, more drugs, just finding their way into practically everything. We tend to stay up later. We're getting an hour less sleep than people were averaging 50 years ago. So many health destroying influences, and it makes eating fruits and vegetables even more important. So I would say those are the first two, and to couple that with getting enough sleep even when you feel good, to not push so hard. I've asked a lot of people in my career. I've asked a lot of people who were getting towards the end of their career and asked them, what would you have done differently? And they said, I would have worked less and gotten a little more sleep and had a little more free time to just enjoy life. Enjoying life, having a reason to enjoy life, but enjoying life is a huge part. And getting enough sleep is critical, because if you're always walking around tired, that's just a negative. I'd say a huge factor to me would be something that I learned about as a kid. I remember reading an article written by Dr. George Sheehan, who was a fairly famous heart surgeon, but he wasn't famous for his heart surgery. He was famous because he was also an ultra distance runner, a long distance runner. And that was most uncommon back in the 60s and 70s to be a long distance runner. The running craze didn't really get rolling until well through the 70s and into the 80s. So when he was a distance runner, I think even in the 50s, it was uncommon. And he used to write an article for the local paper, and one of the articles he wrote, he said, lift and jog. And he said, or some equivalent of lift and jog. So he says, you got to have your cardiovascular health and you've got to have your strength. Well, this is more true today because life is much easier than it used to be. We don't beat rugs anymore. We don't walk 3 miles to go find out if our neighbors are home so we can borrow a cup of sugar and walk back 3 miles, or whatever it is. We use labor-saving conveniences all the time. We have labor-saving devices built into our labor-saving devices. So now power steering. You don't have to fight the vehicle, and power brakes and roll up and push button windows.
All the new gadgets.
And it used to have to be strong to push a typewriter key. And now you don't even have to. I mean, now it's just, you can almost just think it. You can just talk it and the computer will type. So we've become incredibly sedentary in our lifestyles. And so some form of physical activity, preferably something for some cardio, and definitely something for your strength, because when your strength goes away, you only wish you still had it. It's harder to get it back than it is to maintain it. So I encourage people to do something to continue to build their strength. And then the fifth thing, I would say, even more than positive mental attitude, which is huge, but I would say the fifth thing is to gain a more clear understanding of whether or not what you're doing is actually taking you towards your goals. And that can be done through educational material, through consultations with people who have the information you seek. I see a lot of people doing exercises that aren't taking them towards their desired fitness goals. So people who say they want to have better abs, but they're doing a leg exercise, or a hip flexor exercise rather than an ab exercise. Or people who tell me, I ask them what they do for strength, and then they tell me, and it turns out to be something for muscular endurance, not for strength. And so understanding, you know, and that's not just in fitness, that can be in diet as well, certainly easily. A lot of people tell me they watch what they eat or that they eat really well, but then when we look at what they eat, we find out that it's actually either a high fat diet or it's nowhere near a vegan diet or it's not as clean as it could be in vegan, or they pay no attention to organic or whatever the different things are. Is let's make sure that your program is actually taking you towards your desired goal. Can you imagine if you're, you know, that feeling you get when you're driving your car and you're not sure that you're heading where you're trying to go? And you go, oh my God, this is horrible. Well, the same, I mean, it's the same with our health.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. That was a lot of information in one question. Are there particular foods per se that will slow down our aging?
No, there are no foods that will slow down the aging process.
So just stick to a variety of fruits and vegetables.
There's a tremendous number of foods that will accelerate the aging process, at which point we have to ask, are these actually food? You know, or are they just things that are edible, things we can eat? Uh, Anything that has a toxin in it is to some degree going to accelerate the aging process. And I say that with the clear understanding that everything we eat has some toxin in it. Therefore, no food can slow down the aging process. The goal, however, is to poison yourself as little as possible. And this is done through the consumption of eating fruits and vegetables. Now, you know, we know that there's various acids in fruits, and there's chemicals in fruits that are toxic, and there's, you know, there's cyanide in an apple seed, and anything with potassium in it has a very, very minute amount of radioactive potassium in it as well. Uh, but you could eat fruit for the rest of your life every single day for every single meal, and it won't come out to as much radiation as you'd get to one x-ray from a dentist, which isn't much x-ray either. That's like as much as spending an hour out in the sun. So it's not really like it's a lot, but we know it's there. We have the technology to know it's there. So rather than say, as some of the old time health gurus used to say, thou shalt not poison thyself. Really what we want to do is poison ourselves as little as possible.
Yeah.
And we do this by eating fruits and vegetables as our mainstay. That's where the calories need to come from. That's where the volume needs to come from. That's what, when people walk into your kitchen, they should see fruits and vegetables. And if that's, you know, they open your fridge and go, what have you been eating lately? Oh, fruits and vegetables. Isn't that nice? You know, and if they're seeing bottles, boxes, cans, and bags, and just a lot that isn't supposed to really be going down us, because it's every time we compromise, because life is linear, every compromise is a cumulative effect on us, on our aging process. Yes, you can recover, but you can't undo. You can't undo experiences. You can't undo damage done. You can't undo this sort of thing. It's like they say with head traumas, you know, if you have a concussion, it's not so bad. If you have 2 concussions, you'll recover, you know, you'll be all right. But you have 4, 5, 6 concussions as a young person playing a rough sport, say, you're going to risk potential brain deterioration at an accelerated rate, and bad things are going to happen. So it's cumulative over a lifetime. And so I would say no foods that can, if somebody's selling you something that's going to slow down the aging process, it's a gimmick.
I
Straight out, it's a gimmick.
Yes.
But there's lots of things we can do, you know, smoking, any amount of alcohol consumption whatsoever, all of these sort of things, let alone, we know for a fact that any and all cooked food contains toxins that are so accelerative of the aging process. Not only that they're toxic, but that they also do things like, help promote the formation of tumors and tremors and things that we tend to associate with advanced aging. They also they initiate processes that make it difficult or impossible for cells to reproduce themselves, and or to reproduce themselves perfectly.
Mm.
And this is exactly what the aging process is all about, is when the cells stop reproducing themselves perfectly. So that's the
Beautifully
story.
said.
Oh, bless.
And I love your examples as well. That was excellent. Now, I think you really pretty much answered this one. I don't know if you want to add a little bit to it. Being vibrant is a combination of healthy eating, exercise, rest, and other factors that you already talked about. Can you recommend any specific exercises that will benefit us as we get older? I think you already did touch on this.
Well, what we mentioned is the idea that you don't want to let go of your cardio abilities, at least walking, so that you can. It doesn't have to be high level cardio. You don't have to be running 100-meter dash necessarily, or running mile, which would be even more cardio. 100 meters isn't. You could hold your breath for 100 meters. It's not technically cardio, but you don't have to be able to run a 10K. But if you can't walk a 10K, you might consider that you're in trouble. Uh, at the same point, we mentioned strength is really important. Uh, you don't want to lose your strength. It's easier just to maintain strength. It's not that hard to maintain strength, really. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it does take some effort, which is, so I'd say this is the specific answer to the question if you were just asking it fresh. We have to be willing to put in some effort. There's got to be something dynamic. Now, I always encourage people to have fun, to play. I think you can play your way to health. You can play your way to fitness. Uh, and and when we play, we're willing to be more dynamic. We throw ourselves in as much as possible. Uh, when there's a goal, uh, then we tend to go after it more. So I love the image actually of 10 grown men with a basketball on a basketball court, but no goals at each end, no baskets. And so, although it sounds bad, um, we've got 10 grown men running back and forth up the floor, dribbling and passing. it doesn't it doesn't really work. There's no reason to do it without that basket, without the goal. So life is a lot like that, I think. And when we're practicing, when we're doing anything that ends or includes what we call work, so whether it's homework, we invent ways to dawdle, or we invent interruptions. But when it's play, then interruptions is the one thing you don't want to have. You say, oh, I don't want to be interrupted. I don't even want to be interrupted to eat. If I'm playing, I'm having a good time. And you tend to throw yourself in with much more intensity when you play. So I would like to see some intensity in, well, if you're asking, aging 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and beyond, to push yourself a little within your reasons, within your boundaries. We're not looking to ever get hurt. I don't want to ever see people get hurt, but to push yourself a little bit, uh, because otherwise the whole thing, it's a very slow process as we start to lose our abilities. And then all of a sudden you turn around and go, I used to be, oh no, I don't want to go ice skating. I might fall down, or I used to be able to run, or I hate to have to say those kinds of things. And they happen. These things do happen to us, but we don't need to assist them. We need to keep our abilities as big as possible, uh, especially if you're not paying attention to certain areas of your fitness, they will go away. So flexibility will go away unless you do something about it. And balance will go away unless you do something about it. To me, I put more emphasis on balance. I would put balance right up there with strength and cardio. Balance is huge.
Excellent. Fantastic, fantastic tips. Um, so now we're going to change the topic. And I really like when you were saying play, that made me really think that like your exercise should also be fun to you. Like
Absolutely.
I do those things that I have fun doing. Like I hike. I love hiking. I'm not a runner, never really loved it. But hiking, it's just, I love it. I love being out in nature. So that's where I get my
That's the
exercise.
job.
And jumping on a rebounder, I have a routine. It's fun. And because I have that routine, I know I'm going to jump for a half an hour. So if you have things that you are drawn to, like what you said, that play aspect really helps you to stick with it. So I really like that. The next one is you and your wonderful wife, Rosalind, have raised a beautiful, healthy daughter. And I want to ask you, why do you believe it's so important? As you know, I'm on the same belief as you are about kids, that we raise our children on a whole foods, fresh, plant way of eating.
Well, I'll cite the study first. Okay, studies have shown us really clearly that children who are raised eating fruits and vegetables, raised eating whole foods, tend to have better eating habits than their peers in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, as long as these studies have gone on. They've gone on for quite some time, and sometimes we go back and ask, sometimes done through questioning, but they tend not to be overweight. They tend to be more intelligent. They tend to be more successful in life. They tend to have fewer accidents, injuries, and illnesses. These are critical things to success as a healthy human being. So what we think of as the developmental years. Now, different aspects of our anatomy and our physiology develop at different paces. So our hand-eye coordination isn't really finished developing until around 12 to 14 years old, and various aspects of mental growth don't complete themselves until we're into our 20s, and whether it's physical height or stature or secondary characteristics, a lot of things come on over time. So developmental years typically are considered the first 3 series of 7 or up to 21 years old, but it could easily be till you're 28 or 35 that we still see people developing and growing in different aspects of who they are. Hopefully at that point, then we start to focus on maturing and developing mostly up in our heads, but there's a lot of this going on. And what we've learned in science is that this setting of the stage is the most critical time. Now, I did an experiment one time, unintentionally, but I did an experiment. I was living in Georgia. It was really warm one Christmas day. And so I planted peas in my garden. It was early for peas, but I planted them anyway because it was so warm. And I thought, wow, we might just have a warm winter and I'll get the first peas of the year. Well, it snowed on those peas. The peas shot up and they did really nicely when they were 6 or 8 or 10 inches tall. It snowed a few times. We got some bitter cold and a lot of wind, and the peas did fine through all of that because it's Georgia. It's not that cold. And about 12 weeks later, I planted a second batch of peas in the early spring. And it was just spectacular. Beautiful, warm weather, sunny days, just as spring-like as you could ever want to hope for. And the peas shot up and passed the ones that had gone through the tough winter and actually developed faster, further, sweeter fruit, better fruit, more fruit, because they just had their developmental time, those first 6, 8 weeks of the plant's life, it had everything it needed rather than harsh conditions.
Mm.
We use the phrase stunt your growth. Kids say, "Can I have a cup of coffee like you, Dad?" And you go, "No, it'll stunt your growth." You know, or they say, "Can I smoke a cigarette like you, Mom?" And they go, "No, it'll stunt your growth." Or how come you get alcoholic beverages and I get grape juice? You get wine, I get grape juice. And they go, "Because the wine will stunt." We understand the concept of how critical those developmental years are. But what we didn't really understand was that it wasn't just stunt your physical growth. It was stunt your emotional growth, stunt your physiologic growth, stunt your intellectual growth, stunt your mental growth, your ability to stay positive, your ability to your actual intelligence, outlook on life. We're not only stunting growth, we're stunting the development of a tremendous number of hormone systems and other physiologic systems that will determine how healthy you are in your 40s, 50s, 60s, on through. At what point will things start breaking down? If you give them a good start, if you give children a good start, things start breaking down at a much later age than if they have to go through a really harsh start, you know, never having enough food, or always being beaten down emotionally, or having to eat out of garbage cans, or whatever it might be. I'm not saying, you know, but it's critically important to start your children off with a really good start, as good as you can. And it's also inherent in every mother to do this, to really nurture their child. Uh, I don't see it in every father, but I see it in most fathers. As they get to know their children a little bit better, because moms just have a head start on knowing their children. But as the fathers start to get involved, they also want to nurture and support and do everything they can to help the development of their child. Uh, but again, if we go back to my earlier comment of, is what we're doing actually taking us where we're trying to go? So what some people think is nurturing, uh, we might look at that and go, gosh, you know, like seafood and chicken or whatever, that's not really nurturing your children. So we have to look and understand, is what we're doing actually taking us towards our goal? If you're attempting to raise a healthy child, it's critical that they get the very best that you possibly can give them in the younger years. And as a father, and I'm sure as a mother, once in a while, as you're raising your children, you wonder, gee, I ate all these candy bars when I was a kid, and my child's never tasted that. I wonder if she's missing out. You know, and I go, no, she's not missing out. I was missing out because I was eating candy bars rather than apples and pears and plums and peaches. And then I spent silly hours in front of a TV set, just silly hours in front of a TV set as a child. And my daughter hasn't done that. And I go, I wonder, is she missing out? You know, and I go,
No
no, she's
way.
actually not missing out.
No.
She's choosing something else, and she's getting something that's helping her with her development. She's pursuing her own interests. She's reading a lot of books, and she doesn't. It's not that she doesn't know, therefore she doesn't feel like she's missing out. She's not missing out. She's actually, what she's missing out on is being sick, you know, having childhood illnesses, having terrible acne. She's just missing out on all the downtime that most kids experience. She's just not
Brain
having it.
fog and attention, right?
So
A lot of kids have.
to me, at what point does it stop being critical? I don't think it ever stops being critical that we take super good care of ourselves. Um, but in a sense, once we get past those developmental years, some of the things that will seriously harm a child will have much less harmful effect on an adult because of things like, well, if you look at your liver compared to you, and then you look at a child and their liver compared to them, a child's liver is a quarter the size, a sixth the size, an eighth the size. A baby's liver is a tenth the size compared to their body of an adult and their liver compared to their body. Therefore, when a child has a few sips of Coca-Cola or some soda product or coffee or caffeinated beverage, that caffeine affects them dozens of times more than it would to an adult. It's like an adult drinking 20 cups of coffee. So, and we see this sometimes at parties when you give them a little bit of sugar, right? And the same thing happens and they go wild for a while. And it's just a fascinating thing. So to me, this child development thing is critical. And I don't think it stops, because as a 66-year-old man, I'm very aware that if I don't take great care of myself, I feel it. And I don't want to feel it. I don't ever want to feel anything less than as good as I possibly can. And I've had some injuries over the years, and I've had some accidents, and I've had some illnesses, and I had a relatively I'll call it normal childhood. You know, I was raised on standard American diet and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of overcoming, and the stage wasn't set for optimum development. My parents tried, but they didn't know. I don't blame them. But we now know how to do better. It's incumbent upon us to do better. And I need to take the best care of myself now that I possibly can, or I'm going to suffer the consequences just like anybody else.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Graham. Um, is there a specific sequence of raising a healthy vegan child that parents should be aware of in terms of when to introduce fruits and vegetables and stages?
Well, certainly children go through stages, and every child is a little different in that regard. And there's, I paint this brush with, you know, with a broad brush and broad strokes, because it's not like on the 9th month this happens. It doesn't. It could be the 3rd month for some kids, and it could be the 18th month for some kids, and that's just huge parameters of how big, you know. Some kids are born with teeth in their mouth, and the other kids don't get teeth for many months. So it's not even fair to say like on day 1. But we can say that mother's milk is critically important, not only as a hormone delivery system, as an immunofactor delivery system, but also for the connection and the nurturing, and as a fuel source,
Mm-hmm.
as a food, as a nutrient source. And mother's milk is the best for human children. So
Right.
I personally, you know, although I've never breastfed, but my approach is that children should breastfeed for as long as they want to. But I don't always see that model in nature. You will see sheep or cow or whatever, dogs and cats, and you know, all the mammal moms occasionally tell their kids no. At this moment, it's not convenient, you know, but they're not telling them no, you can't have it anymore. They're just
Right.
saying no, right this second, it's
Not
not
right now.
perfectly convenient. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think kids should be allowed to breastfeed for as long as they want, because it's a trauma they don't need to go through to just be told no, like
Right.
no more, you can't have that anymore. You know, we're just not doing that. That's my personal understanding of what's best for the child.
Right. What
Which
about
is a
first?
lot longer than most people think. I mean, if we look at worldwide averages run somewhere into the ninth year, 10th year, 11th year isn't unknown by any means that children will breastfeed that long. It does not mean they're doing so for food and nutrients any longer. As a primary fuel, as a primary food, mother's milk can easily suffice a child for a year. Easily. I know children had only breast milk for 2 years, and I know plenty of children who by the end of 6 months they kind of lost interest and they wanted berries and they wanted other juicy fruits, and that's okay
Mhm.
if that's what they choose. But um, I think most children will go through many years of a transition as they start to introduce, a bite of food, 2 bites of food. Between taking a bite of food and 2 bites of food and getting in 1,000 calories a day from food, could take some children 6 or 8 years before they figure out how to eat that full 1,000 calories a day that they need to just run around and play. And by the time they do, and they're 6 or 8 years old, they actually need 12, 14, 1,600 calories. So that the process just keeps going for quite a while to learn to eat enough. Uh,
Yes.
and so from mother's milk, we introduce fruits, and I would keep it simple. I'm a big fan of keeping food simple, and certainly for children, we don't have to create like crazy huge. We don't have to make their palate become so jaded that they won't accept anything unless it's fancy. Uh, Fruits and vegetables. After fruits come in, then vegetables. A lot of mothers really freak out about vegetables. I can't get my child to eat vegetables. They don't have to eat a lot. They don't, if they eat a lettuce leaf now and then, they're doing just fine. If you're eating vegetables, they will start eating vegetables. If you offer vegetables, they will start eating vegetables. If you just keep showing them that it's perfectly normal to eat vegetables, by the time they're 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, they will start eating vegetables if they see it every day. But we certainly in our house, we never had a problem. Rosie and I love our salads. We'd eat a salad every night. Faye started with a tiny little salad, but she'd have it every night. But it was a tiny little, and I say every night, but occasionally she just didn't want it. And we go, okay, fine. Not a worry. Have some fruit.
Yeah.
Uh, a bowl maybe a third as big as what I was eating, and then it was half as big. And nowadays she eats as much salad as I eat. So
Yeah.
I mean, she blows through salad and loves it every night. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. Now, some of the families that I've worked with, the mothers are often concerned that their child is at the end of the first year of life and not eating solids yet, and their doctor has made them very concerned about iron, getting enough iron, and that they must supplement. And I've known that, iron supplementation can be quite toxic to the body.
sure.
um, and we can get, if a mother is has a diet that is high in leafy greens and iron rich fruit, that the iron is usually easily transferable to the baby. But also this, I find it from so many parents that they're not willing to wait for when their child is ready. Sometimes a child doesn't even have enough teeth to chew yet, but the parent is really feeling that they need to push food before 1 year old. And I'm finding some kids just don't eat until after 1 year old,
Yeah.
and between 1 and 2, and sometimes even closer to age 2. Can you just give us your point on that?
Again, it's tough to make a general rule, but if I was going to make a rule, I would say just breastfeed for the first year. Just breastfeed for the first year. That's normal. That's average. It's not every single child. It might be 9 months for some kids, but most kids really aren't that interested in anything other than breast milk if they're getting good sweet breast milk. Now, again, it depends on what the mom eats. The flavor of the breast milk does depend to some degree on what the mom eats. And if she's eating a lot of broccoli and onions, it's not going to make for the sweetest milk. That's just the reality of things. But if she's eating a lot of fruit, then mother's milk tends to taste a lot better, and it's just that little bit sweeter, and it doesn't take much to be a discernible amount. Uh, if you sprinkled a few grains of sugar onto a piece of fruit, you would know that that sugar was added in. We can discern. Our taste buds tell us about sugar really, really profoundly. And kids' taste buds, infants' taste buds are so much more sensitive than our own.
Yeah.
It may not be like they may not be able to tell you all the things. They may not have the vocabulary to go with it, but their senses, their hearing, their vision, their touch, their sight, their taste, this is all far more sensitive than ours. So we have to respect that, and know that the milk has to taste good, or the mother or the child isn't going to want it. The child will refuse milk that doesn't taste good. But I would say a year is a fairly typical average, but there's nothing wrong. We get into a funny thing where we expect our kids to grow up sometimes faster than they really can, and we have to realize, oh, they're only 3, or oh, they're only 5, or oh, they're only 7, 9, or 12. They are still just kids, and we can only expect so much from them. If they were all grown up already, then they would be out earning a living, and taking care of us, but they're not. They still need us to take care of them, and we can't rush. There's no advantage to trying to rush this process of growing up.
Totally agree. Thank you so much for that. I know that you lead water fasting retreats in Costa Rica. Can you explain the differences between the effects of water fasting and dry fasting, which some people are believing is very beneficial, and some of the benefits that you've observed over the years, because you've been doing this for many, many years, some of the benefits that you've seen in people who have committed to water fasting, and even some of the health challenges that you've dealt with, and how water fasting has worked for these people.
Okay, so this isn't a quick question. It's certainly not a quick answer, but let's delineate a little bit. If you open up a dictionary, fasting means to abstain from, but that's not how we use it in our vocabulary. So when you say water fasting, we're not abstaining from water. We're actually consuming only water. We're abstaining from everything else. When we dry fast, we're not abstaining from dry. We're actually, that's the one thing we are having. So when we juice fast, we're on juices. We're not abstaining from juices. So the vocabulary, the terminology is a little different. In fact, the opposite of what the dictionary explains. And people do get confused as to what is a fast. Now, you could have a short fast, you could have a micro fast, you could, how short is it and still be considered a fast? Most people these days think that if you didn't eat in between meals, you were fasting in between meals, and they call that intermittent fasting. Certainly in our language, if you don't eat between going to bed and waking up in the morning, you have breakfast. That 8 or 10 or 12 hours went by, and that was considered a fast. These are very, very short fasts in the sense of supervised fast, water fast. But in a hospital setting, where the goal is to recover and get out of the hospital, or if you're in an intensive care unit where the goal is to recover and get out of intensive care so that you can get to the hospital, or whether you're in sports where the goal is to recover, to perform and recover. In all of those settings, what we know is that hydration is key. Without hydration, none of the other things that are associated with recovery can actually happen. Recovery becomes the limiting factor. And if we look at modern society, the medical people tell us that most people are severely dehydrated, that it affects their performance level, that most people should be drinking 8 to 12 glasses of water per day. And in a sense, they're saying, look, your food is so dehydrating to you, your lifestyle is so dehydrating to you, that you need to add 8 to 12 glasses of water just to stay even. Hydration is that important that medical people who typically don't go into the nutritional realm all that much are saying that water is profoundly important. Right? To take that and turn it on its head and say that if you want to get healthy, the way to do so is to dehydrate yourself is counterintuitive, it's counterintellectual, it makes no sense whatsoever. Will people feel better if they don't eat for a couple of days and don't drink for a couple of days? Sure. Because they stopped doing the things that were making them feel sick. And they stopped having to process food. And that made for a huge release in availability of energy, because normally you're spending a third of your energy just to digest the food you eat, a third to a half of your energy just to digest the food you eat. So if you stop, then you just go, oh, I feel much better because I've got this fuel available now that I didn't have. But it's first of all, it's very short term because you are going to go back to eating. and it didn't. One of the things that's inherent in human beings is all of us think, whether we're sick or injured, that we should get better faster than we actually can. We get sick and tired of being sick and tired. We get, if you have a cold, you want it to be over instantly. If you sprained your ankle, you want to be better in 48 hours, but really it takes a week or 2 or 3. And we're not good at gauging our recovery in this sense. We want to get right back to it and be well instantly. And so we're always looking for this faster way, a quicker way to get healthy. Dry fasting is not it. Dry fasting is a deadly practice. I couldn't recommend against it more strongly. I guess I agree with the medical people in this sense that hydration is king in terms of, we can go 40 days without food, but to go a week without water is usually deadly. And it's not the fastest of the fasts. If the goal was to dehydrate, the way to do that would be to eat salt. So if somebody wanted to really get, they could just don't drink and eat salt and you get dehydrated. But this isn't a method to go to health. This is actually a method to die. An ounce of salt will kill you. So concentrating the salts in our body, concentrating the toxins in our body by removing fluid and not putting more in, this is not a health process. And you're straining your kidneys dramatically. You're putting the liver at tremendous strain to do its job. Your blood is getting thicker, which puts a lot of load onto your heart and your smaller vessels. There's nothing about dry fasting that could be considered a health practice. Whereas water fasting has a time-honored history. Virtually all of the great religious leaders of all history fasted for not only for cleansing, but for clarity, but for spiritual awareness, and for health. The ancient Greeks, 2,500 years ago, had places where you could go to get well that were run by the priests, and you couldn't just go in to these hospital settings. You couldn't just go in. You had to wait outside and be approved. and there was a 3-day waiting list to go into the sanitariums. These were open air facilities that were basically just gardens where you went and ate fruit. Pretty fascinating, and that's how people got well. Uh, but it was the 3-day wait list, and what you had to do for those 3 days was not eat and just drink water. And in that 3 days, well, very often most people got well and went home anyway. They were not so sick that they had to even go in to see the priests, uh, who were the doctors of their time. This time-honored history of water fasting, not only in humans, but in all mammals. Most whales go 6 to 9 months without eating anything as part of their normal annual cycle. Uh, the bull seals, the elephant bull seals, often go 6 months out of every single year without eating at all. Many, many mammals automatically fast as part of their seasonal annual changes. And it's set up by nature that if a mountain lion's running down a hill chasing after something and it falls and breaks a leg, it'll just lay there until the leg heals. Human beings are the same. We are set up for fasting to be the quickest possible way for us to get well from illness, accident, injury, whatever it may be. To the point that I've seen broken bones heal in 3 weeks in people in their 60s and even in their 80s. Broken femurs heal in 3 weeks, where doctors will tell you that for an 80-year-old woman, it could take 8 to 12 weeks to heal. And I've seen it before and after x-rays, perfectly healed in 3 weeks. I have a doctor friend who was back to work. He was 60, broke his femur, and he was back to work in 3 weeks. Through
Incredible.
water fasting. It's the way nature set it up for us to get well as quickly as possible. So we can actually from this say that every facet of anatomy and every aspect of physiology vectors towards health when we fast. But fasting is rife with some potential dangers, and I don't take it lightly. In a time where everybody was very healthy and life was very productive, we were physical, to take a day or two or a week or two and fast was a much safer occurrence than it is today. Now where fasting is an unknown, it's not as common as it was. People are sicker than we've ever been in history. We have things, we have conditions that are coming out now that are virtually unknown to humankind's entire history. I mean, AIDS is a brand new disease. There's something called post antidepressant use syndrome. I mean, antidepressants have only been around for a few decades. So post antidepressant use syndrome, is a relative unknown. There's a lot of conditions that are coming out now that are brand new conditions. So we are sicker than ever. We're more obesity, more heart disease, more diabetes, more of all the basic diseases. A lot of the things that were considered diseases of old people, there's now hospitals for children for cancer. So when we fast, there's the potential for things to go wrong. And the most common one is fear. So more fasts I see broken because of fear than for any other factor. It's worth having someone trained medically, trained in fasting, who knows what's going on, who can assess and tell you, oh, I see that all the time, don't worry about that. Or, oh, that's potentially dangerous. This would be a good reason to go get some help. I have taken people to hospital. I had a lady who was fasting with me for 2 days and I had to take her to the hospital. 2 days. It wasn't because she was, we hadn't done anything basically, but her blood sugar went awry, and the only thing to do is take her to the hospital. It's the smartest thing to do. It took her, she spent overnight and then came back. But had she not known, probably within 12 hours, she would have been in a coma. And then she couldn't have even gotten to the hospital. I know many people who've fasted on their own who ended up in comas. And then fortunately, because there were people around who took them to the hospital, they you know, they were taken care of and came out of it. But there's just as many who don't. And so I do recommend supervised fasting.
Definitely.
But I'd say at this point in life, I've fasted people for practically every known condition there is. And it's the natural thing for human beings to get well. This is what people do. I mean, we've all had illnesses and we've all recovered. It's the natural thing to get well. When we fast, this is when we get well faster than ever. And it's what we do every day. We rely on this. You go all day long, you give your best, you do all you possibly can from morning till night. And when you run out of your ability to keep going, you go to bed, you take a short rest. In the morning, we break fast and you start again with newfound energy, newfound attitude, new things have healed. And we want this to happen in an adult-sized portion. What fasting is about is like an adult-sized portion of nurturing, an adult-sized portion of rest. We get into a situation where we can relax, let somebody else worry about us for a while, educate us a bit during the fast of how the body works, teach us how to eat properly afterwards. And this is critical because the second thing is fear breaks more fasts than anything, but I've heard hundreds of stories of fasts gone wrong. Every single one of them was fasting without appropriate supervision. Every single one of them was either no supervision or inappropriate supervision. Oh yeah, my mom was supervising me. I'm like, does she know how to do that? No. It'd be like being in an airplane and just deciding you want to go up to the cockpit and take over for the captain. I mean, flying isn't that hard, but landing is kind of critical, and breaking the fast is the most critical part. Anybody can fast, it's easy, but to break a fast appropriately, to incorporate fitness and food back into balanced proportions, introducing the right foods, developing the proper eating habits that are going to bring you a healthy outcome, this is critical. And without supervision, most people fail.
Yes. Wow. Very powerful stuff. And people really need to know that. I never recommend that anybody do a water fast beyond 3 days on their own.
Right.
So supervision is definitely very, very important. And I have known of people who have gotten into huge trouble doing longer on their own.
Sure, me too.
Dr. Graham, can you give us information on your upcoming water fasting retreat and what someone interested can expect, how they contact you?
Sure.
And also, I know that you have retreats in Washington State. Tell us about what you offer.
Well, thanks. I'm going back to the same facility that I used the last time I did a Costa Rica fast 2 years ago. It's off the beaten path. It's not way up in the mountains. I've done fast way up in the mountains. It gets a little too cold at night. I've done fast down at the beach. It's just unbelievably hot. Like it's not restful. It's so hot and buggy. So I tend to avoid the beach down there. It's just too hot. It takes a lot of getting used to. The sun is just too powerful. So this is sort of the middle ground, a couple thousand feet above sea level. So we have spring-like weather, low 60s in the nighttime and high 70s in the daytime. It's dry time of year. We're going to go from the last day of February till the 28th of March. And we'll all meet down in Costa Rica, close to the airport. I rent a bus and take everybody together. It's a group affair. It's going to be a small group. I'm maxing out around 9 people. I want it to be personal for each and every individual. I want to be able to give them my full attention. Uh, we're focusing in on resting, but we take time all afternoon, every afternoon is an educational discussion. I have certain things that I like to present, but it includes questions and answers and some stories. We talk about other fasters and learn from them. We talk about what makes for healthful living and what makes for appropriate fasting. And so the day goes by, we're monitoring daily and keeping track of people, helping to define their goals, teaching them about how to develop their own self-image and their own ability to set goals and work towards them, and what happens when they get distracted from that and how to deal with that. Learn what our healthy eating patterns, and when we go through the whole program, we got a month to really talk things through, and we make a point of doing so. It's as far as I know, unique in the world of supervised fasting in that aspect, because we're going as a group. Where everybody comes in at their own time and goes out at their own time, it's hard to bring them all together for daily educational presentations because everybody's at a different point in their fast and it's not appropriate. So this way you can say what to expect on day 1, what to expect on week 1, what to expect on week 2. We're not looking to make it a long fast. The goal isn't to fast as long as possible. The goal is to fast as short as possible and still get the job done, as long as necessary, as short as possible. So a lot of people are coming because they are super healthy and they want to get better. Plenty of people are coming because they have health issues, heart issues or arthritis or whatever it is that's bothering them. I've never ever in my life fasted somebody purely for weight loss, and I wouldn't do that. It's not the best way to lose weight. Uh, it's It's a very low key facility. We have a little swimming pool where it's just beautiful. It's quiet. It's all, like I say, it's off the beaten track. So it's just quiet. Everywhere you look could be green all the way around us. And, and we're the only ones on the facility other than the owners themselves. It's just a lovely experience. I'm glad to go back there. I set up a gym there as well so that we can teach people all about fitness after the fasting experience. Most people are going to fast for maybe 2 weeks or 18 days or something like that. And then they'll spend the last half of the fast or the last third recovering and building back into their fitness program.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's a really good time. And I've taken, I don't know, probably a couple dozen groups down to fast in Costa Rica over the decades. And we just keep having positive experiences down there. It's great because the food is excellent. It's the height of fruit production in March. And so it's just a great time to be down there.
Beautiful,
Perfect.
beautiful weather in March
Yeah,
also.
perfect dry weather, height of fruit production. I mean, it's all the right things happen. We're in an area where you could drive in almost any direction and you're going to hit pineapple fields. So we get some fantastic pineapple. Mangoes are, popping at that time of year. The melons are still going. All is good. All is good down in Costa Rica, really. So that happens. That happens in the winter. We get people out of winter. And as I say, we're just taking a few. But I'm looking forward to going. Every September, I run a variety of retreats in the state of Washington, just north of Seattle. Again, it's a facility that I've been going to for 15 years. I've gone back to the same facility every year because I like it. It's just perfect for our needs, and the people are very accommodating. We take over the whole facility. I teach a course in raw culinary skills. We teach a course called Health and Fitness Week that I've been teaching since 1996. I teach a course usually in some other focused area of the raw food, and we choose different areas of raw food, whether it's just a women's week or it's just something about a specific aspect, like just for runners or just for cyclists or just for yoga. We teach a couple of basic courses every year for people who are new to the raw foods and want to learn how to make it work for themselves. Sometimes I'll even offer a fast, but not so much because the one in Costa Rica is just so divine, such a
And
good
so,
time.
and so, Dr. Graham, how can people get in touch with you?
The best way really is through my Food and Sport website. It's 10 letters if you haven't ever gone to Food and Sport. It's the word food followed by the letter N and then the word sport, foodandsport.com. Uh, you can email me from the website, or you can email me directly at dr.graham@foodandsport.com. And if you go to dr.graham@foodandsport.com, that'll come directly to me, and I'll always answer. If you have questions, uh, I'm not trying to sell things, obviously, but if you have questions or you want to know more about fasting, or you're interested perhaps in fasting, write to me. We really qualify people a lot. There are plenty of people, I'd say probably half the people who apply, I tell them that I don't think fasting is really in their best interest at this time. And I turn a lot of people away, uh, which again might be unique in the world of fasting supervision, but I turn people away because I want them to have the best possible experience. I need to know that they're going to have a positive outcome. To the best of my ability, I need to know, because I don't want to disappoint anybody.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Graham, for this really wonderful, most informative interview. And I'm going to put links
Oh,
in
thank
my
you.
newsletter so that people can get in touch with you, and also with the pointers, highlighted pointers of what we talked about, so that people will be, really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for being so thorough.
Yes. It was so great talking to you today and seeing you again. Thank you so much for
The
being
treat
with
is
us.
mine. The treat is mine. I look forward to getting a chance to spend some time with you face to face again, Karen. I hope we'll see some of you in Costa Rica.